77 motorcycles made the diner windows rattle like loose teeth in a winter jaw. Chrome caught the late afternoon light and threw it back in hard flashes. Exhaust hung low over the parking lot, bitter and metallic, mixing with the smell of fried onions and coffee inside. Donna was already reaching under the counter for the phone when the door chimed. The boy didn't hesitate. He walked straight toward the longest table in the room, where leather vests creaked against vinyl seats and heavy boots rested wide on cracked tile. His hoodie was too thin for February. His cheeks were red from cold. His fingers looked raw. He stopped at the edge of the table and opened his small fist. Coins hit wood. The sound was sharp, clean, bright, against the low rumble of engines outside. "I have $1.37, he said, voice steady but thin. "Is that enough for soup?" Every biker went silent. Even the grill seemed to stop breathing. The club president, Mason, didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just looked at the coins. Then, at the boy. Paper circled the child's wrist. Hospital white. Snapped tight. Today's date printed in black ink. And a last name. Harper. Mason's throat tightened before he could stop it. For a second, nobody moved. The boy stood with his chin up like he had practiced bravery in a mirror. He didn't look at the patches on their backs. He didn't look at the knives clipped to belts. He just waited. Donna stepped closer, wiping her hands on her apron. "Sweetheart, a cup is $3.50. The boy flinched at the number. He started pulling the coins back toward himself like he could hide the shortage if he moved fast enough. "I can find more," he blurted. "I can." Mason placed his palm over the coins before they scattered. "You don't have to," he said quietly. He reached into his vest and pulled out a folded 20. The bill made a soft paper whisper as it touched the table. "2 bowls," Mason told Donna. "One here, one to go. Extra crackers." Donna hesitated, eyes glassy, then nodded and turned toward the kitchen. The boy didn't sit. He kept his eyes on Mason's hands. "Hey," Mason said, lowering himself slightly so he wasn't towering. "What's your name?" "Ellie." "How old are you, Eli?" "6. "You here by yourself?" Eli nodded once, then corrected himself quickly. "My mom's here. She can't get up." A chair shifted somewhere down the table. Not aggressive. Alert. Mason glanced again at the wristband. "Harper. Where's she staying?" he asked. Eli's gaze flicked to the window and back. "Sunrise Motel, room 12, by the ice machine." The words came out like they were heavy. "Is she sick?" Eli nodded. "She's hot. She says she's fine," he swallowed. "She's not." Donna returned with steam rising from a chipped white bowl. She set it carefully in front of Eli. The smell of chicken broth filled the air, warm and soft against the sharp scent of oil and leather. Eli stared at it like it might disappear. He lifted the spoon with both hands, took a sip. His shoulders dropped an inch. Relief, not joy. Outside, a patrol car rolled past. The diner windows slow as syrup. No lights, just presence. Mason didn't stare at it. He watched Eli instead. "Does someone stay with you and your mom?" Mason asked. Eli's spoon paused midair. "Sometimes." "Who?" Eli's voice went small. "Mike?" The way he said the name wasn't casual. It wasn't affectionate. It was weather. Donna followed Mason's glance toward the window. Her voice lowered. "That's Deputy Rohr." Mason didn't react on the surface. Inside, something went tight. The patrol car circled back. This time it stopped across the street. Engine running. Lights off. Eli finished half the bowl too fast, then reached for the paper bag. Donna had folded tight around the second serving. He hugged it to his chest. "That's for your mom," Mason said. Eli nodded hard. Mason's eyes flicked again to the wristband. Harper. The name pressed against an old promise he hadn't thought about in years. "Listen to me," Mason said, voice low enough that only Eli heard. "You walk straight back. You don't talk to anyone. If anyone tries to take that bag, you come right back here. You understand?" Eli nodded like he was terrified to get it wrong. Donna squeezed his shoulder. "Be safe, baby." The bell over the door chimed bright as Eli stepped outside. Cold air rushed in behind him. He made it 10 steps before the patrol car door opened. Deputy Rohr stepped out slow. Early 30s. Clean uniform. Smile polished. He crossed the street like time belonged to him. The diner door chimed again as he walked in. Roar scanned the room once, then let his gaze settle on the long table of vests. "That's a lot of motorcycles for one little diner," he said lightly. Mason stayed seated, hands visible on the table. "We're eating." Roar's eyes drifted to the empty space where Eli had stood, then to the window, then back to Mason. "You fed him?" He asked for soup. Roar nodded like he was making a note in his head. "That boy's under my watch," he said. "His mom's complicated. You don't want to get involved." Mason didn't blink. "If a 6-year-old is counting change for soup," he said evenly, "your watch might be broken." The smile thinned for half a heartbeat. Then it returned. "Careful," Roar said softly. Across the street, through the window, Eli was a small figure moving toward the corner, paper bag pressed to his chest. The coins Mason had covered were still warm under his palm. Harper. Outside, the patrol engine idled. Inside, nobody reached for the phone now. They were watching the door. Deputy Roar didn't sit. He let the door close behind him and took 2 slow steps into the diner like he was inspecting a property he already owned. The bell's chime faded. The engines outside kept idling, low and patient. "Sunrise Motel's not exactly a playground," Roar said, casual. "Strange place for a kid to wander into a biker rally." Mason rested his forearms on the table. He didn't look toward the window this time. He didn't give Roar that angle. "He wasn't wandering," Mason replied. "He was hungry." Roar's smile held, but his eyes sharpened. "You know his last name?" Mason didn't answer that. Roar slid his gaze down to Mason's hand, still half covering the coins on the table. He tapped the wood lightly with one finger. "That family's under supervision." "Supervision," Mason repeated. The word tasted wrong in the air. Roar leaned in just enough to make it personal without making it obvious. His cologne cut through the diner's smell of broth and coffee. "You pass through town, you eat, you ride out. That's how this works." Mason's voice stayed level. "We didn't follow him." Roar tilted his head. "Didn't say you did." A waitress dropped a fork somewhere near the counter. The metallic clatter echoed too loud in the quiet. Outside, the patrol car's engine revved once and settled again. Roar stepped back, straightened his jacket. "You don't know that woman. You don't know what she does when she needs something." "I know she was in an ER today," Mason said. The wristband burned in his mind. Harper, printed black against hospital white. Roar's smile flickered for a fraction of a second. Then it reset. "People go to the ER all the time." He turned as if to leave, then paused near the door and glanced back over his shoulder. "You don't want to turn charity into interference," he said. "That can get messy." The door chimed again as he stepped out into the cold. Through the window, Mason watched Roar stand on the sidewalk for a moment, not getting into the cruiser, not leaving, just watching the direction Eli had gone. Then Roar finally slid into the driver's seat and pulled away slow, tires whispering over pavement. The diner exhaled. Skye shifted in her seat across from Mason. "He's not done." "No," Mason said quietly. He uncovered the coins and pushed them back into a neat stack. The metal felt colder now. "Map says Sunrise Motel's less than a mile," Tank muttered from down the table. Mason didn't answer immediately. He was looking at the door, not because he expected Eli to come back, but because he was measuring time. If the deputy was circling, he'd reach the motel first. Skye leaned forward. "You thinking about riding?" Mason's jaw flexed once. "2 bikes, no pack." He stood, dropped bills on the table without counting, and picked up his helmet. As they stepped outside, the cold hit sharp and clean. The sky was turning bruised purple. Engines fired up in staggered sequence, deep and controlled. 2 bikes rolled out. The rest stayed. The road to Sunrise Motel was short and uneven, patched asphalt and cracked lines. Neon flickered ahead like a dying pulse. The sign buzzed red against the darkening sky. Mason didn't pull into the main lot. He coasted past once, eyes forward. Deputy Roar's cruiser was parked near the office. Engine off. Lights dark. Mason's pulse slowed instead of speeding up. Skye eased beside him, boots scraping gravel. "He's here." Mason circled once more and parked behind a dead light near a dumpster. They cut engines at the same time. Silence fell heavy without the vibration. Across the lot, Room 12's curtain shifted. The ice machine groaned beside it. Eli stood at the door, small hand shaking as he tried to swipe a key card. The paper bag was still clutched to his chest. Red light. Beep. Red again. He glanced over his shoulder, panic rising. Skye stepped a few paces closer, but kept her hands low. Slow, she called softly. Eli swallowed and swiped again. Green. The door cracked open. Warm, stale air leaked out. Mom? He called. From inside, a woman's voice thin, strained. Eli, close the door. He hesitated, eyes darting across the lot. Deputy Rohr stepped out from behind the motel office. Not hurried, not surprised, just present. Mason felt something settle into place in his chest. Because the deputy wasn't reacting. He was waiting. Rohr crossed the gravel slowly, boots crunching deliberate. He didn't look at Mason or Skye. He looked at the door. Well, he said lightly, there you are. Eli froze. The bag crinkled in his arms. Come here, buddy, Rohr said, smile warm. We're going somewhere better. Eli didn't move. Inside the room, the woman coughed a deep, tearing sound that echoed against the thin motel walls. Mason stepped forward, not fast enough to be called aggressive, just enough to make himself visible. We're just making sure he got back, Mason said. Rohr didn't glance at him. You made sure. His hand lifted toward Eli's shoulder. Not rough. Not yet, but firm enough that Eli's body stiffened. You don't need to touch him, Skye said. Rohr finally turned his head slightly. His eyes were flat now. Everything's under control, he replied. I've got paperwork. The word hung there. Paperwork. Inside his cruiser, in the passenger seat, a manila folder lay open. White sheets visible even from across the lot. Rohr had already printed an emergency custody order no clerk had ever filed. He knew exactly what he was going to say before anyone asked. Eli looked up at Mason, confusion and fear mixing in his eyes. He says we have to go, Eli whispered. The neon sign flickered overhead. Mason's gaze dropped to the motel door, where a clinic notice was taped crooked against the wood. Pay by Friday. The paper flapped in the wind. Rohr guided Eli a half-step closer to the cruiser. Sun's going down, he said softly. Let's not make this dramatic. Mason watched the folder on the passenger seat again. Paper, authority, control. And he understood something clearly now. This wasn't about safety. It was about ownership. The ice machine groaned again. Room 12's door stayed half open, and the cold kept settling in. The motel lot felt smaller now. Gravel, neon flicker, the thin hum of the ice machine grinding against the cold. Rohr kept one hand lightly on Eli's shoulder. Not enough to bruise, enough to guide. We're going somewhere safe, he said. Your mom needs rest. Inside room 12, Lena tried to step forward and failed. She caught the door frame instead. Her skin was flushed and unhealthy red. Sweat clung to her hairline. He stays with me, she rasped. Rohr's tone shifted instantly, warmer, softer. Lena, you can barely stand. Another cough ripped through her, deeper this time, wet and violent. It folded her in half. Eli flinched at the sound and tried to pull toward the door. Rohr's fingers tightened. Easy, he murmured. Mason stepped closer. She needs a hospital. Rohr didn't look at him. She left one. Because of money, Skye said quietly. Rohr's smile returned, but it was thin. People make choices. Lena swayed again. The clinic notice taped to the door fluttered in the wind. Pay by Friday. Mason didn't argue further. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen glowed cold against the dark lot. He hit dial. Rohr's eyes flicked to the movement. Who you calling? Mason didn't answer him. He raised the phone to his ear. 911, a dispatcher answered. Sunrise Motel off Route 9, Mason said evenly. Room 12, adult female, high fever, severe cough, difficulty breathing. She needs EMS now. Rohr stepped closer, voice low. You can hang up. Mason's gaze stayed steady. Stay on the line, he told the dispatcher. There's a deputy here attempting to prevent medical assistance. Skye's head turned slightly. She understood what he'd done. Put it on record. Sir, what's the patient's name? The dispatcher asked. Mason looked at Lena. Ma'am, he called. Your name? She hesitated, eyes flicking toward Roar like permission mattered. "Lena," she whispered. "Last name?" A pause. "Harper." Mason felt it land again, but he kept his voice flat. "Lena Harper." Roar's jaw flexed. "You're escalating this," he said softly. "I'm documenting it," Mason replied. The faint sound of sirens drifted in the distance, far, but real. Roar's posture shifted. He turned slightly so his body blocked Eli from Mason's line of sight. "She doesn't want transport," Roar said. "You're forcing this." Lena tried to straighten. "I can't pay." "You can't breathe," Mason cut in gently. Another cough tore through her, harsher than before. She reached blindly for the edge of the door. Eli slipped free of Roar's grip just long enough to grab her waist. "Mom," he whispered. The sirens grew louder. Roar exhaled slowly, recalculating. He stepped back half a pace, but didn't leave. Red and blue light spilled into the motel lot, washing over peeling paint and cracked asphalt. The ambulance pulled in hard. A second unit followed state markings on the door. 2 EMTs jumped out with a stretcher. Roar moved first, intercepting. "False alarm," he said smoothly. She refused care. The female EMT didn't break stride. "Ma'am," she called past him. "Can you take a deep breath for me?" Lena tried. The inhale caught halfway. Her body shook. The EMT's expression changed immediately. "We're transporting?" Roar held up a hand. "She doesn't have insurance. That's not tonight's problem," the EMT shot back. The older EMT reached Lena's side and checked her pulse. Oxygen monitor clipped fast. "Low. Too low. She's critical," he said. Roar's smile tightened. "You're creating panic." Mason lifted the phone slightly so the dispatcher's faint voice carried through the speaker. "EMS is on scene," he said clearly. "Deputy is attempting to interfere." Roar glanced toward the second vehicle. A state trooper stepped out. Not hurried. Not impressed. "What's the situation?" the trooper asked. "Medical transport," the EMT answered without hesitation. "Respiratory distress." Roar's voice smoothed out again. "Everything's handled." The trooper looked from Roar to Lena to Eli, then to Mason. "Who called?" he asked. "I did," Mason said. The trooper nodded once. "Transport," he told the EMTs. Roar's smile cracked for half a second. Lena was guided carefully onto the stretcher. Oxygen mask secured, monitor beeping steady but weak. Eli tried to climb up with her. "I'm riding," he said. Roar stepped forward. "He comes with me." "No," the female EMT said immediately. "He rides with his mother." Roar's eyes hardened. The trooper shifted position slightly, boots crunching gravel. "Deputy," the trooper said evenly. "Let medical do their job." The words weren't loud. They were final. Roar held still for a beat too long. Then he stepped back. "Fine," he said lightly. "We'll sort it out at the hospital." Eli climbed into the ambulance, blanket still clutched in his fist, paper bag crumpled against his chest. As the doors closed, Lena reached weakly through the gap and touched Mason's wrist. Not a grip, just contact. Her fingers were burning hot. "Thank you," she breathed through the mask. The doors shut with a metallic thud. The sirens flared again as the ambulance pulled away. For a moment, the motel lot was silent except for the ice machine's grind and the distant echo of engines fading. Roar stood under the neon light, face unreadable now. "You think that fixes it?" he asked quietly. Mason lowered his phone. "No," he said. "It makes it visible." Roar's eyes flicked toward his cruiser, where the manila folder still rested on the passenger seat. "Paper." He smiled again, but there was no warmth left in it. "This isn't over." Mason didn't answer. He was already watching the road the ambulance had taken, and Roar was watching him watch it. The hospital lobby smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flat and unforgiving. The automatic doors whispered shut behind Mason and Skye as they stepped inside, helmets in hand. They didn't rush. "Running made you look guilty." Across the room, a triage nurse looked up, eyes tightening the moment she saw the leather vests folded over their arms. "Can I help you?" she asked, already reaching for the desk phone without making it obvious. "We're here with the woman from Sunrise Motel," Mason said calmly. "Lena Harper. Her son is with her." The nurse hesitated. "You family?" "No," Skye answered. We just want to make sure the child isn't separated. Before the nurse could reply, the sliding doors opened again. Deputy Rohr walked in like he had an appointment. No hurry, no apology, badge catching the fluorescent glare. He nodded to the nurse as if they were colleagues sharing a shift. Evening. Her posture changed, immediately subtle, but visible. Rohr's gaze drifted across the lobby until it landed on Mason. A smile curved across his mouth, controlled and easy. "You just can't help yourselves," he said lightly. Mason didn't move. "Is the kid with his mom?" "For now," Rohr replied. "But that's temporary." He tapped the manila folder tucked under his arm. "Paper." Sky's eyes followed the movement. Rohr stepped closer to the triage desk and opened the folder slowly, like he was unveiling something ceremonial. He pulled out a clean sheet with a bold heading across the top. "Emergency Protective Custody. Signed and authorized," he said. "Effective immediately." The nurse's eyes widened slightly. "Deputy, we haven't—" "You will," Rohr cut in smoothly. Mason stepped forward just enough to see the page without touching it. The signature at the bottom looked official, a magistrate's name printed clean beneath it. Rohr placed his index finger on the seal and pressed it gently to the counter. "The system updates later," he said, voice steady. "Paper updates now." The words hung in the sterile air. Sky's jaw tightened. "Case number?" she asked. Rohr didn't look at her. "Not your concern." He turned slightly toward the nurse. "The child will be released to my custody. The mother is sedated and unfit." Behind the desk, the nurse swallowed. "We need verification." "You have it," Rohr replied. Mason's phone vibrated in his pocket. He stepped aside and pulled it out. Donna's name flashed across the screen. He answered without breaking eye contact with Rohr. "They called the diner." Donna's voice came in tight. "Sheriff's office. Told me not to release footage." "Preserve it," Mason said quietly. "Don't delete anything." He ended the call and stepped back toward the counter. Rohr was still standing there, still smiling. "I'll wait," Rohr said. "Call the clerk if you want." The nurse hesitated, then picked up the phone. She dialed. The fluorescent hum seemed louder while they waited. Rohr leaned back against the counter casually, one ankle crossing over the other. He glanced toward Mason. "You're making this dramatic," he murmured. The nurse spoke quietly into the phone, giving the magistrate's name and the case heading. A pause. Her brow furrowed. "I'm sorry," she said. Another pause. She covered the receiver with her hand and looked at Rohr. "They have no emergency custody filed under Harper." The air shifted. Rohr didn't blink. He straightened slowly and held out his hand. "Let me speak to them." The nurse hesitated, then handed him the phone. Rohr pressed it to his ear, listening for a few seconds. Then his smile returned. He handed it back without saying much. "They're updating," he said calmly. "Small counties move slow." The nurse looked unconvinced. Mason stepped closer, eyes on the paper. "The clerk just told her there's no filing," he said. Rohr tapped the seal again. "Magistrate signed it," he replied. "That's the law." Sky crossed her arms. "Juvenile court signs custody." A flicker barely there passed through Rohr's expression. Then it smoothed out. "You pass through town and suddenly you're legal experts," he said lightly. From down the hall, a door burst open. Eli. He stood in the corridor barefoot, hospital blanket wrapped around his shoulders, eyes wide and searching. The sight of Mason made him take one small step forward. Rohr moved first. He pivoted, blocking Eli's line of sight. "Hey," Rohr said warmly. "There you are." Eli froze. A social worker rushed after him, breathless. "He ran from consult." Rohr crouched slightly, lowering his voice. "Buddy, we're going somewhere better." Eli's gaze darted past him, locking on Mason. Fear flickered there. "He says I have to go," Eli whispered. Rohr stood and turned back toward the nurse. "You see?" he said softly. "He's confused. I'm stabilizing the situation." Mason stepped forward. "You don't get to take him." Rohr's eyes went flat. "I already did," he said. Before anyone could react, he reached for Eli's hand. The boy flinched and twisted away. The blanket slipped from his shoulders. For a split second, the hallway held its breath. Then Eli ran. Not toward the lobby doors. Toward the deeper corridor marked "Staff Only." Security shouted. Shoes slapped against polished tile. The nurse swore under her breath. Roar's smile vanished. And for the first time that night, he looked like he hadn't expected the next move. The red exit sign at the end of the staff corridor glowed like a warning. Eli's bare feet slapped against the polished tile, small and frantic. The blanket trailed behind him like a torn flag. Voices echoed off sterile walls, security calling out, a nurse shouting for someone to block the stairwell. Mason moved. Not charging, not shoving, just fast enough to keep the boy in sight without turning the hallway into a riot. Eli, he called, steady. Left. Follow the red sign. The child didn't hesitate. He veered toward the metal door marked Authorized Personnel Only. Behind them, Deputy Roar's boots struck the floor in sharp, controlled steps. "Stop!" he barked. The tone wasn't warm anymore. It was command. A nurse fumbled with a keycard at the staff exit, hands shaking. Eli reached the door just as she pulled it open. Cold air burst inside. Gravel lot below. Ambulance bay. A single county SUV parked under dim security lights. Roar closed the distance in 3 long strides. He caught Eli's arm just as the boy stepped over the threshold. Not brutal, but firm enough to spin him around. "I told you," Roar said tightly. "You're coming with me." Eli's eyes were wide, breath coming in shallow pulls. "I want my mom." "She's sedated," Roar snapped. "You're not helping." Mason stepped into the doorway, blocking the narrow exit without touching anyone. "You don't have verified custody," he said evenly. Roar didn't look at him. "I have enough," he replied. He guided Eli down the metal stairs toward the ambulance bay. The boy stumbled once. Roar steadied him automatically, grip tightening. Security finally reached the door behind Mason but stopped short at the sight of the badge. "Deputy?" one of them asked uncertainly. "Handled," Roar said. The word carried weight. Outside, the night had thickened. Sodium lights cast everything in harsh yellow. Roar led Eli toward the county SUV parked near the loading dock. Mason followed at a measured pace. Skye slipped past security and joined him, phone already raised discreetly. "License plate," she murmured. The numbers reflected briefly under the lights. She snapped the photo. Timestamp visible. Roar opened the rear passenger door and guided Eli inside. "I don't want to go," Eli said, voice cracking. "You don't get to decide that," Roar answered quietly. Mason reached the SUV just as Roar swung the door shut. The click of the lock echoed louder than it should have. "You're making a mistake," Mason said. Roar turned slowly. "No," he replied. "You are." He walked around the hood, slid into the driver's seat, and shut the door. Engine on. Headlights flared white across the loading dock. Skye stepped forward, holding up her phone. "We have the plate." Roar paused with the engine idling, window lowering halfway. "You think that matters?" he asked. "It will," Skye said. For a split second, something flickered behind his eyes. Not fear. Calculation. Then he smiled again. "You're out of your depth." The SUV rolled forward, tires crunching over gravel, then turned sharply toward the hospital exit. Mason stood still until the vehicle cleared the corner. Only then did he move. "Call state," he said. Skye was already dialing. "County deputy removing a minor from hospital grounds," she told the dispatcher. "Emergency custody unverified. Plate number." She read it off carefully. Mason looked back toward the staff exit. The nurse who'd opened the door stood frozen at the top of the steps. "You saw that," Mason said. She nodded weakly. He showed paperwork. Clerk said there was none. Her silence said enough. Mason pulled out his phone and dialed another number. It rang twice. "Donna," he said when she answered. "Save everything. If anyone asks, you don't know how to delete." "They already came by," she whispered. "Sheriff's office." "Good," Mason replied calmly. "Let them." He ended the call and looked back at the dark road beyond the hospital lot. The SUV's taillights were gone. But Skye's phone buzzed again. "State's dispatching a unit," she said. "They're flagging the vehicle as county fleet." Mason exhaled slowly. "Direction?" she asked. He replayed the turn in his head. "North," he said. "Toward Maple Ridge." Skye's jaw tightened. "That's not toward any foster office." "No," Mason replied. The wind cut through the open bay, cold and sharp. Inside the hospital, alarms beeped faintly. Life continued in orderly lines. Outside, something had tilted. Security finally found their voices. "We can't stop a deputy," one muttered. Mason looked at him steadily. "You just watched him take a child without confirmation." The guard swallowed. Skye checked her phone again. "State units 3 minutes out." Mason nodded. They moved toward their bikes without urgency, engines firing up in low unison. Not a pack, just two. As they rolled toward the hospital exit, red and blue lights appeared in the distance. State police. The cruiser slowed at the intersection, headlights sweeping across Mason's helmet. He lifted a hand once, directing them north. The trooper's vehicle accelerated. Gravel kicked up behind it. For a moment, the road ahead was empty. Then, far off in the distance, faint taillights flickered against the dark stretch leading toward Maple Ridge. Mason throttled forward. Not chasing, tracking. Behind him, Skye's voice came through the helmet comm. "State's logging it. This is official now." Mason didn't answer right away. He watched the road, steady and black. Paper might claim authority, but metal left tracks. And tonight, there were witnesses. The highway north narrowed after the county line. Streetlights thinned out. Pine trees crowded the shoulders. The dark felt heavier out here, like it absorbed headlights instead of reflecting them. Skye's voice came through the comm, steady and clipped. State confirmed the plate, registered to County Sheriff's Office fleet. Mason kept his eyes on the road. Driver? Assigned vehicle. Deputy Michael Rohr. No surprise. Up ahead, red and blue lights flared briefly, then disappeared over a rise. "State unit has visual," Skye continued. "They're not engaging yet." "Good," Mason said. "Let them box it." They crested the hill. In the distance, the county SUV's taillights cut through the dark, moving faster now, not racing, just committed. A green highway sign flashed past on the right. "Maple Ridge. Next exit." "That's not a Foster transfer route," Skye muttered. "No," Mason replied. "It's woods and vacation cabins." The SUV signaled late and took the exit hard. The state cruiser followed at a controlled distance. Mason throttled down and stayed back, keeping space between chrome and flashing lights. The exit ramp curved into a two-lane road bordered by trees. No businesses, no streetlights, just the occasional mailbox reflecting headlights like a blinking eye. Skye's phone buzzed again through the comm system. "Dispatch says no emergency custody has been logged in county or circuit systems," she said. "Nothing under Harper, nothing filed tonight." Mason felt something settle deeper in his chest. Paper without record. Authority without anchor. Up ahead, the state cruiser's siren flicked on short burst. Controlled. The county SUV didn't stop. It accelerated. "Now it's pursuit," Skye said quietly. Not high speed, not reckless, but deliberate. The road narrowed further, bending toward a cluster of dark shapes tucked among trees. Cabins. One porch light glowed faintly near the end of the lane. The SUV turned sharply into the gravel driveway of the last cabin. State lights washed the trees red and blue as the cruiser followed in, blocking the exit. Mason slowed and stopped at the mouth of the driveway, engine idling low. He didn't need to be closer. He could see enough. Deputy Rohr stepped out first. He didn't look panicked. He looked annoyed. The rear door of the SUV remained closed. The state trooper exited his vehicle and approached with measured steps. "Deputy," the trooper called. "Step away from the vehicle." Rohr lifted his hands slightly, palms out, but didn't move far. "Child protective," he said. "Emergency custody." "Dispatch shows no filing," the trooper replied evenly. "It's pending. Then you shouldn't be driving north to a private cabin." For a moment, the only sound was gravel shifting under boots and the faint hum of engines. The trooper moved toward the rear passenger door. Rohr shifted to intercept. "Hold on," he said. "You don't need to escalate." The trooper's tone didn't change. "Open the door." Rohr hesitated. Too long. The trooper reached for the handle himself and pulled it open. Inside, Eli sat rigid against the seat, blanket wrapped tight around his shoulders. His eyes were glassy but alert. He looked smaller in the confined space. The trooper crouched slightly to meet his eye level. "Hey," he said calmly. "You okay?" Eli didn't answer right away. His gaze flicked past the trooper, searching the dark beyond the flashing lights. He saw Mason at the edge of the driveway. Recognition steadied him. "He said we were going somewhere better," Eli whispered. The trooper's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. "Step out, buddy," he said gently. Eli climbed down slowly. Roar took one step forward. "He's under my authority," he insisted. "I have a signed order." "Produce it," the trooper said. Roar walked to the front seat and retrieved the manila folder. He handed over the document without hesitation. The trooper scanned it under the cruiser's spotlight. Silence stretched. Then the trooper's radio crackled. "Confirmation," dispatch said. "No emergency custody filed. Magistrate's office closed at 1700 hours. No after-hours signings recorded." The trooper lowered the paper. "This seal number doesn't match current registry," he said quietly. Roar's posture changed. The polish slipped. "It's legitimate," he replied, but the certainty was thinner now. The trooper folded the paper once. "Turn around," he said. Roar stared at him. "You're making a mistake." "Turn around!" Gravel crunched as Mason finally killed his engine. He didn't approach. He watched. Roar's jaw worked once, twice. Then he turned. Metal clicked. Handcuffs. The sound carried clearly in the cold night air. Eli stood between the cruiser and the cabin, blanket wrapped tight, watching the man who had tried to guide him north. Red and blue lights pulsed against the trees, against the cabin's wooden siding, against Roar's rigid shoulders. The trooper guided him toward the back seat of the state vehicle. "Forgery of judicial order," the trooper said into his radio, "and unlawful removal of a minor." Skye exhaled through the comm. "It's logged," she said softly. Mason walked forward slowly now, boots crunching over gravel. He stopped a few feet from Eli. Didn't kneel. Didn't reach. "You okay?" he asked. Eli nodded once. But he didn't move closer. Not yet. Behind them, the trooper secured Roar inside the cruiser. The fake paper lay folded on the hood, illuminated by the rotating lights. Authority undone by a registry number. Metal left tracks. And tonight, the track led here. Maple Ridge. Under flashing lights, where paper finally failed, the ride back felt slower. Not because of traffic. Because of weight. State police escorted the convoy south, lights no longer screaming, just rotating in steady authority. Deputy Roar sat in the back of the cruiser, wrists secured, posture stiff. He stared forward, jaw locked, as if still trying to calculate a version of the night where this ended differently. Eli rode in the front passenger seat of the trooper's vehicle, blanket tucked around him like armor. He didn't speak much. He watched the passing trees instead, eyes reflecting the red and blue lights each time they swept across the windshield. Mason and Skye followed at a respectful distance. No pack. No roar. Just two engines humming low. When the hospital came into view again, fluorescent white replacing forest dark, the state cruiser pulled into the emergency entrance and parked directly beneath the security camera dome. Intentional. Visible. Doors opened. Cold air slipped inside the ambulance bay as officers stepped out. The trooper walked Roar around the front of the cruiser. Hospital staff had gathered near the automatic doors, nurses, a security guard, a few late-night visitors drawn by the lights. Recognition spread quietly. The trooper didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Deputy Michael Roar," he said, firm and clear. "You are under arrest for forgery of a judicial document and unlawful removal of a minor." The words carried across tile and concrete. Roar's shoulders squared. "This is a procedural misunderstanding," he said evenly. "You're embarrassing the department." The trooper didn't react. He guided Roar forward, metal cuffs catching the fluorescent light. The automatic doors slid open. For a moment, the entire lobby stilled. The same triage nurse stood behind the desk, eyes wide but steady this time. Roar's gaze flicked toward her, then toward Mason. No smile now, no polish, just calculation running out of space. They walked him straight past the desk, past the waiting chairs, toward the side hallway that led to security processing. Every step echoed. Mason stood near the entrance, but didn't interfere, didn't gloat. He watched the badge disappear down the corridor. Eli stepped out of the cruiser slowly. The trooper crouched to meet him. "You're going back to your mom," he said gently. "You ride with me." Eli nodded. but his eyes searched the lobby until they found Mason again. This time, he walked closer on his own. Not all the way, just enough to close half the distance. "They're not taking me?" he asked quietly. "No," Mason replied. "Not tonight." The trooper guided Eli toward the elevators. As the doors closed, the fluorescent lobby returned to its normal hum. Security cameras blinked red. Witnesses dispersed. Skye stepped beside Mason. "Sheriff's going to feel this." "He already does," Mason said. Almost on cue, the main doors slid open again. Sheriff Braddock entered with measured authority. No sirens, no visible rush, just presence. Mid-50s, crisp uniform, expression carefully neutral. He scanned the room once, then locked eyes with Mason. "You made a scene," the sheriff said calmly. Mason didn't flinch. "Your deputy forged a court order." "Allegedly." State confirmed. Braddock's jaw tightened slightly. "Internal review will determine that." The triage nurse cleared her throat softly behind the desk. "Clerk confirmed there was no filing," she said. Braddock didn't look at her. He kept his gaze on Mason. "You pass through town and suddenly you're law enforcement?" he asked. "No," Mason replied. "Just present." The word landed heavier than intended. Braddock stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't understand how small counties work." "I understand how paper works," Mason said evenly. "And registry numbers." A flicker of irritation passed across the sheriff's face. For a brief second, the control slipped. Then it returned. "My office will handle this," Braddock said. "You're done here." Mason held his stare. "That kid isn't a jurisdiction," he said quietly. "He's 6. The sheriff's eyes hardened. "You want to keep pushing?" he asked softly. "Because I can push back." Skye shifted slightly, phone still in hand. Behind them, the elevator dinged. The trooper stepped out with Eli, who clutched the blanket tightly but walked straighter now. "We're taking him to ICU," the trooper announced. Braddock glanced at the boy, then at the trooper, then back at Mason. "Temporary," the sheriff said. "Until review." The trooper's tone didn't change. "State has jurisdiction pending investigation." Silence filled the space between badges. Not loud, but undeniable. Braddock looked at Rohr being escorted down the hall one last time. Then he straightened his collar. "This isn't over," he said quietly. Mason nodded once. "I know." The sheriff turned and walked out the same automatic doors he had entered. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Eli hesitated near the elevator, looking back one more time. Mason didn't step closer. He simply placed his helmet on the bench beside him and met the boy's eyes. A silent promise. Not dramatic, not loud, just there. The elevator doors slid shut again, carrying Eli upward toward ICU glass and machine hum. In the hallway beyond the lobby, a booking camera flashed once as Rohr was processed. Paper had moved him all night. Now metal had. And the building remembered. The ICU hallway was quieter than the rest of the hospital. Not silent, just contained. Monitors pulsed in steady rhythm behind glass. Air vents whispered. The light here was softer but colder, blue-edged, clinical. Eli stood on a plastic chair to see through the window. His palm pressed flat against the glass. Inside the room, Lena lay propped slightly upright, oxygen line resting beneath her nose now instead of the full mask. Color had returned faintly to her cheeks, but exhaustion hollowed her eyes. A nurse adjusted a drip and stepped away. Eli didn't knock. He just stayed there, hand against the barrier. "I got soup," he said softly. His voice didn't carry through the glass. But Lena saw his lips move. She lifted her hand weakly and pressed it against the other side. Glass between skin. Mason stood several feet back. Not crowding, not claiming space. Just present. The reflection in the glass showed him as a darker shape behind the boy, shoulders broad, stance steady. A wall without touching. Skye leaned against the corridor wall, phone lowered for once. No recording. No strategy. Just watching. A doctor stepped out of the ICU room quietly and approached them. "She's stable," he said. "Severe pneumonia, dehydration, another day, and it could have turned." Eli's hand didn't move from the glass. "Can she talk?" he asked. "Not much tonight," the doctor replied gently. "But she's out of immediate danger." Immediate. The word hung there like a temporary truce. Mason exhaled slowly. From the far end of the hallway, heavy footsteps approached. Sheriff Braddock. He didn't look at Mason this time. He looked at the boy. Temporary custody will be reviewed in the morning, the sheriff said evenly. Until then, the child remains under hospital supervision. Mason didn't respond. The sheriff's gaze shifted to the ICU glass. Then to Mason. "You're not family," Braddock said. "No," Mason replied. "Then your role ends here." Eli turned at that. His eyes flicked between the sheriff and Mason. "Is he going to take me?" Eli asked quietly. Braddock crouched slightly, trying for softness. "No one's taking you tonight." Not a promise. A deflection. Eli looked back at Mason. Mason met his eyes and shook his head once. Not dramatic. Just certain. The sheriff straightened. "This situation will be handled legally," he said, "through proper channels." Skye pushed off the wall. "Like the registry channel?" she asked mildly. Braddock ignored her. He stepped closer to Mason, lowering his voice. "You've embarrassed this department." Mason's gaze didn't waver. "Your deputy embarrassed it." For a fraction of a second, something cracked behind the sheriff's expression. Then it sealed again. "This town doesn't need outsiders rewriting its order," Braddock said quietly. Mason glanced toward the ICU window. "Orders, not paper," he replied. "It's protection." Silence settled again, broken only by the soft, mechanical rhythm of machines behind glass. Braddock held Mason's stare one moment longer. Then he turned and walked down the corridor without another word. His boots echoed until the sound faded. Skye exhaled slowly. "He's going to push back," she murmured. "He already is," Mason said. Eli climbed down from the chair. He hesitated, then walked toward Mason fully this time, close enough that their boots almost touched. "Are you leaving?" Eli asked. Mason crouched, so they were level. "I'm staying in town," he said. "Until your mom walks out of here." Eli studied his face carefully, as if testing for cracks. "You promise?" Mason didn't answer immediately. Promises carried weight. "I don't leave halfway," he said finally. It wasn't dramatic, but it was firm. Eli nodded once. Behind the glass, Lena watched them. Her eyes were clearer now. She saw Mason's silhouette. Recognition flickered. Not from tonight. From somewhere older. The doctor returned, briefly with a clipboard. "Immediate family only overnight," he said apologetically. Eli looked back at his mother. "I'll be here in the morning," Mason told him. Eli pressed his hand to the glass one last time. Lena mirrored the gesture again. The machines kept their rhythm. Steady. Alive. Skye touched Mason's arm lightly. "You sure?" she asked quietly. Mason didn't take his eyes off the glass. "Her name's Harper," he said. Skye watched him for a beat. Understanding dawned. "Caleb?" she asked softly. Mason nodded once. "Years ago. Another road. Another night. A promise made beside flashing lights and broken asphalt. I told him I'd look out for his family," Mason said. He hadn't known there was one. Until now. Behind the glass, Lena's eyes closed briefly, then reopened. Not fear. Not confusion. Recognition. She mouthed something faint. "Thank you." Mason didn't step closer. He just inclined his head slightly. A soldier acknowledging another. The ICU light cast everything in pale blue. Outside the window at the end of the corridor, night pressed against the building. But inside, under steady machines and cold glass, something had locked into place. Not charity. Not interference. A promise remembered. And this time, not forgotten. Morning brought a different kind of light. Less dramatic, more unforgiving. The county courthouse stood square and pale against a washed-out sky. Inside, the air carried the scent of old paper and floor polish. Wooden benches lined the small courtroom, their surfaces carved with initials from decades of waiting. Mason sat in the second row. Not at the front. Not hiding either. Skye beside him, phone silent but ready. Across the aisle, Sheriff Braddock stood near the prosecution table, posture composed, expression carefully neutral. Two deputies lingered behind him, quieter than usual. At the far table sat a county attorney flipping through a thin folder. Paper again. Judge Eleanor Hart entered without ceremony. Mid-60s, sharp eyes behind narrow glasses. She didn't waste movement. "Let's proceed," she said, settling into her chair. The clerk stood. State versus Michael Rohr. Preliminary review of emergency protective custody and associated charges. The room stilled. Deputy Rohr was escorted in, wrists uncuffed but flanked on both sides. He wore civilian clothes now, the uniform gone, the badge absent. He avoided looking toward the benches. The county attorney cleared his throat. "Your Honor, this matter involves an urgent protective action taken in good faith to secure a minor." Judge Hart raised a hand. "I've reviewed the filing," she said. Her gaze shifted to the document in front of her. "The magistrate's seal number does not correspond to any active registry." A small ripple moved through the room. The county attorney adjusted his glasses. "Clerical discrepancy, Your Honor." Judge Hart's expression didn't change. "The magistrate listed denies issuing this order," she said evenly, "and there is no electronic filing in county or circuit systems." Braddock's jaw tightened slightly. The state prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, we move for immediate suspension of Deputy Rohr's authority and issuance of a no-contact order regarding the minor, Eli Harper, and his mother, Lena Harper." The last name echoed softly. Judge Hart leaned back. "On what basis?" she asked. "Forgery of judicial documentation, unlawful removal of a minor, and obstruction of medical transport," the prosecutor replied. Silence pressed in. Rohr finally spoke. "This is political," he said, voice controlled. "I acted to protect a child from neglect." Judge Hart's eyes moved to him. "You fabricated an emergency order," she said. "Protection does not permit forgery." Braddock shifted his stance slightly, stepping forward. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "the department acknowledges procedural errors. An internal review is underway." Judge Hart's gaze sharpened. "Internal review is not a substitute for judicial oversight," she replied. The clerk handed her another sheet. She read it briefly, then looked up. "This court grants a temporary no-contact order effective immediately," she said. "Deputy Rohr is prohibited from approaching, contacting, or exercising authority over Eli Harper or Lena Harper pending full investigation." The words settled like a gavel strike. Rohr's expression faltered for the first time. "Additionally," Judge Hart continued, "this matter will be referred to circuit court for formal charges." Braddock's composure thinned at the edges. "Your Honor?" "Sheriff," she interrupted, voice calm but final. "The integrity of this court is not optional." The room went still again. Mason didn't move, didn't nod, but something inside him loosened. Judge Hart looked toward the state prosecutor. "Ensure hospital records and security footage are preserved," she said. "Chain of custody intact." "Yes, Your Honor." Paper shuffled. The hearing adjourned without drama. No raised voices. No spectacle. Just documentation correcting documentation. As Rohr was escorted out, he finally glanced toward Mason. Not anger, not apology. Just the realization that the room no longer bent around him. Metal doors closed behind him with a dull thud. Braddock lingered a moment longer. He approached Mason directly this time. "You've made your point," the sheriff said quietly. "This wasn't about points," Mason replied. Braddock studied him. "You think you won?" Mason considered the question. "Not yet," he said. Braddock's eyes flicked toward the courtroom doors. "The department will recover," he said evenly. "It always does." "Then make sure it recovers right," Mason replied. A beat passed between them. Then Braddock turned and walked away. Outside the courthouse, the sky had shifted brighter. Sky exhaled slowly. "No contact orders clean," she said. "Logged statewide." Mason nodded. Across the street, a local news van idled quietly. Camera lens pointed toward the courthouse steps. Narrative was shifting. Not loudly, but visibly. Sky glanced at him. "ICU called earlier," she said. "Lena's oxygen levels are improving." Mason looked toward the hospital down the road, its pale facade catching morning light. "Good," he said. They walked toward their bikes without urgency. No roaring engines. No victory lap. Just movement. As they mounted up, Mason paused briefly, helmet resting against his thigh. Paper had tried to take a child. Paper had tried to excuse it. Now paper had drawn a line instead. Not the end, but a boundary. He pulled the helmet on and started the engine. The courthouse steps behind him stood quiet again. Inside, ink was still drying, and across town, in a glass-lined ICU room, a mother's breathing had steadied. Morning brought a different kind of light. Less dramatic, more unforgiving. The county courthouse stood square and pale against a washed-out sky. Inside, the air carried the scent of old paper and floor polish. Wooden benches lined the small courtroom, their surfaces carved with initials from decades of waiting. Mason sat in the second row, not at the front, not hiding either. Sky beside him, phone silent but ready. Across the aisle, Sheriff Braddock stood near the prosecution table, posture composed, expression carefully neutral. Two deputies lingered behind him, quieter than usual. At the far table sat a county attorney flipping through a thin folder. Paper again. Judge Eleanor Hart entered without ceremony. Mid-60s, sharp eyes behind narrow glasses. She didn't waste movement. "Let's proceed," she said, settling into her chair. The clerk stood. State versus Michael Rohr. Preliminary review of emergency protective custody and associated charges. The room stilled. Deputy Rohr was escorted in, wrists uncuffed but flanked on both sides. He wore civilian clothes now. The uniform gone, the badge absent. He avoided looking toward the benches. The county attorney cleared his throat. "Your Honor, this matter involves an urgent protective action taken in good faith to secure a minor." Judge Hart raised a hand. "I've reviewed the filing," she said. Her gaze shifted to the document in front of her. "The magistrate's seal number does not correspond to any active registry." A small ripple moved through the room. The county attorney adjusted his glasses. "Clerical discrepancy, Your Honor." Judge Hart's expression didn't change. "The magistrate listed denies issuing this order," she said evenly, "and there is no electronic filing in county or circuit systems." Braddock's jaw tightened slightly. The state prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, we move for immediate suspension of Deputy Rohr's authority and issuance of a no-contact order regarding the minor, Eli Harper, and his mother, Lena Harper." The last name echoed softly. Judge Hart leaned back. "On what basis?" she asked. "Forgery of judicial documentation, unlawful removal of a minor, and obstruction of medical transport," the prosecutor replied. Silence pressed in. Rohr finally spoke. "This is political," he said, voice controlled. "I acted to protect a child from neglect." Judge Hart's eyes moved to him. "You fabricated an emergency order," she said. "Protection does not permit forgery." Braddock shifted his stance slightly, stepping forward. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "the department acknowledges procedural errors. An internal review is underway." Judge Hart's gaze sharpened. "Internal review is not a substitute for judicial oversight," she replied. The clerk handed her another sheet. She read it briefly, then looked up. "This court grants a temporary no-contact order effective immediately," she said. "Deputy Rohr is prohibited from approaching, contacting, or exercising authority over Eli Harper or Lena Harper pending full investigation." The words settled like a gavel strike. Rohr's expression faltered for the first time. "Additionally," Judge Hart continued, "this matter will be referred to circuit court for formal charges." Braddock's composure thinned at the edges. "Your Honor." "Sheriff," she interrupted, voice calm but final. "The integrity of this court is not optional." The room went still again. Mason didn't move, didn't nod, but something inside him loosened. Judge Hart looked toward the state prosecutor. "Ensure hospital records and security footage are preserved," she said. "Chain of custody intact." "Yes, Your Honor." Papers shuffled. The hearing adjourned without drama. No raised voices. No spectacle. Just documentation, correcting documentation. As Rohr was escorted out, he finally glanced toward Mason. Not anger. Not apology. Just the realization that the room no longer bent around him. Metal doors closed behind him with a dull thud. Braddock lingered a moment longer. He approached Mason directly this time. "You've made your point," the sheriff said quietly. "This wasn't about points," Mason replied. Braddock studied him. "You think you won?" Mason considered the question. "Not yet," he said. Braddock's eyes flicked toward the courtroom doors. "The department will recover," he said evenly. "It always does." Then make sure it recovers right, Mason replied. A beat passed between them. Then Braddock turned and walked away. Outside the courthouse, the sky had shifted brighter. Sky exhaled slowly. No contact orders clean, she said. Logged statewide. Mason nodded. Across the street, a local news van idled quietly. Camera lens pointed toward the courthouse steps. Narrative was shifting. Not loudly, but visibly. Sky glanced at him. ICU called earlier, she said. Lena's oxygen levels are improving. Mason looked toward the hospital down the road, its pale facade catching morning light. Good, he said. They walked toward their bikes without urgency. No roaring engines. No victory lap. Just movement. As they mounted up, Mason paused briefly, helmet resting against his thigh. Paper had tried to take a child. Paper had tried to excuse it. Now Paper had drawn a line instead. Not the end, but a boundary. He pulled the helmet on and started the engine. The courthouse steps behind him stood quiet again. Inside, ink was still drying. And across town in a glass-lined ICU room, a mother's breathing had steadied.